You know how you can read the same sentence as a friend and come away with two totally different ideas? It happens, right? But what if that text was some ancient, mystical book about how the universe was made? And what if the two readers were these brilliant scholars from the same century who saw, well, not just different meanings, but two completely different worlds? Okay, let's get into it.
For centuries, thinkers and mystics were absolutely obsessed with this one question. Are letters just symbols? Or are they something more? Could the very building blocks of our language, the alphabet, actually be the building blocks of all reality?
Well, this one super mysterious text, the Sefer Yetzirah, came along with a pretty radical answer. It basically said, yes, the universe wasn't just described by letters, it was literally built with them. And that single idea, it kicked off one of the most interesting intellectual showdowns of the 10th century.
So to really get this conflict, we first have to understand the book that started it all. What in the world was the Sefer Yetzirah?
Okay, so the Sefer Yetzirah, which means Book of Formation, is this short but really dense text that lays out this incredible story of creation. It says that God created everything, the stars, the planets, the seasons, our bodies, by combining the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and 10 primal numbers, the Sephirah.
What's so wild is how the text talks about letters. They're not just, ink on a page. The book says God carved them, hewed them, combined them, weighed them, and even calls them stones. And that's a huge idea, right? That letters have actual substance, that they're physical, creative things you can use to build reality itself.
All right, let's meet our two 10th century scholars. Both were brilliant, both were totally fascinated by this book, but they were reading it from two completely different worlds.
So on one side, you have Saadia Gan over in Babylonia, which was like the hub of rationalist philosophy. He was deep in this theological movement called Kalam, which really pushed for a non-physical God and that scripture was number one. So his whole goal was to make the Sefer Yetzirah line up with the book of Genesis. But then you have Shabbatai Donnolo in Byzantine Italy, a world just buzzing with astrology, icons, and this mix of Greek and Babylonian science. His goal was totally different. He wanted to use the text to read the stars and figure out God's cosmic plan.
So their first big disagreement was about the letters themselves. Were these things really divine, magical objects, or something else?
Saadia, the rationalist, just could not accept that physical letters were some kind of divine toolkit. For him, that completely contradicted Genesis, where God creates the world just by speaking. So he argued no, the letters are just agents of that speech. But Donnolo, he leaned right in. He saw them as true writing from God, basically an astrological code that let us read the map of the entire universe.
And this was actually a brilliant move by Saadia. He created this hierarchy. You've got God first, then comes God's voice, and only after that do you get the air where the letters are formed. See what he did? He made the letters a mediation of a mediation, kind of like an echo of an echo, not a direct piece of God. He totally neutralized their magic.
And their disagreement didn't just stop with the letters. Oh no, it went way deeper, into the very structure of the cosmos, all centering on this one mysterious, powerful thing mentioned in the text.
The Sefer Yetzirah talks about something called the Tli. It describes it as a king ruling over the whole universe. But what was it? The answer to that question really shows the massive gap between our two scholars.
For a lot of mystics, the Tli was this cosmic dragon or a serpent, a real active force up in the heavens that had power over the constellations and, by extension, over our lives here on Earth. It was like a central gear in the universe's astrological machine.
And right here, you see the clash perfectly. Saadia looks at the Tli, uses the science of his day, and says, nope, that's just an astronomical coordinate, a point where two orbits cross, just a spot on a map that we identified. But Donnolo sees a divine creation, a powerful being that actually reveals God's grand design.
So the crucial point for Donnolo is that the Tli wasn't some passive coordinate, it was an active player. He believed God actually created it from water and fire, and that it had real influence. It could bring both goodness and malignancy down on the world. For him, the cosmos was just alive with divine power.
So, we've got two brilliant minds reading the exact same words and coming up with completely opposite conclusions. Why? Well, the answer really is all about the worlds they came from.
Sadya's entire way of thinking was shaped by his surroundings. The philosophy all around him demanded a god with no physical form and rejected magic. And his number one commitment was to the Bible. So he had to read the Sefer Yetzirah in a way that stripped out all the magic and astrology and turns it into a philosophical text that played nice with Genesis.
Donnolo's world was a whole different story. He was a Jewish scholar in Byzantine Italy, a culture that absolutely loved icons and astrology. He even learned to read the stars from a Babylonian teacher. So his challenge was to navigate that world, to find a way to see the universe as a divine map, without, in his eyes, falling into idolatry. And his reading of the Sefer Yetzirah was his brilliant solution. He treated the universe not as a direct image of God, but as an allegorical icon that, if you read it right, points towards God's truth.
So what does this whole 10th century debate about a mystical book tell us today? Well, it actually reveals something really profound about knowledge itself.
The main takeaway is this. A text, any text, isn't some fixed, static thing with only one true meaning. It's really a mirror. It reflects the mind, the culture, and the questions of the person who's reading it.
The story of Saadia and Donnolo just makes it so clear. While the words on the page obviously matter, the context we bring with us, our cultural background, our personal beliefs, the questions we're asking, that stuff plays a massive, often decisive role in what we end up seeing.
Ultimately, their rivalry is a timeless lesson. It teaches us that we are not just passive receivers of information. We are active interpreters. And how we build meaning is just as important as the raw information we start with.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty big question to think about. If every time we read something, it's also an act of self-reflection, what do our interpretations of the world, the news, the data, the stories we tell, what does it all really reveal about our own time, our own culture, and ourselves?